So currently, someone is moving out of the house I live in. So when I heard a bunch of commotion around the house, I thought it was just them getting more stuff out. Upstairs in my house, there is a hallway, and if you step in the middle just right, it makes a very distinct creak. This was the first of what I heard. A few minutes later, I heard a lot of movement downstairs. Again, I thought it was just them moving their stuff. I soon realised it wasn't when I looked out of the front door and their car wasn't out front. It was silent. I stood there, not knowing what to do. Yes, I probably should have just left, but for some reason, I felt stuck. Like leaving the house wasn't an option. I could feel my heart in my chest beating. That was the only thing I could hear, my heart. Then came a cough from the kitchen. No other noise. It was not who I thought it was. I sped walked upstairs and went to the bedroom and stood there, next to the gun. I didn't know if it was a person that broke in or what. I eventually got the courage to walk around the house, armed of course, but no one was there, just me. I went back upstairs to put the gun away, and just as I do, in the corner of my eye, I see a bleached white head in the doorway. It was low to the ground, like it was lying down, probably about shin height. I looked over quick, and when I tell you the fear I felt when I was able to get a clear look of it before it disappeared, I would. It had medium to big sized ears, an overgrown buzz cut, sunken eyes, to the point it was just two black voids, and the mouth was a grin, but blackened. If anyone can tell me anything, please do. So, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, after rewatching The Woman in Black 2. I know, horrible thing to start with. Ever since I was really little, I was really fascinated, intrigued, obsessed, however you'd classify it, with stories about British kids who were sent away during World War One. Can't explain it. Narnia, Peter Pan 2, random stories I'd find in the library, etc. I just was always drawn to these stories. I also remember playing with my friends and sister, and my imaginary play always went to we're kids, but we were sent away from our parents, so we have to take care of each other. And maybe that could have been just from what I was watching. I really don't know. I have also always had dreams plenty often, less often now that I'm older, but recently have started up again, of being bombed. Like, I'll see planes flying and hear the bombs drop from the sky. It's always dusty, and I'm running and I feel little. I always feel lost and helpless, like when I'd lose my mom in the store when I was 6 years old. It's that same kind of bottomless pit feeling. And when I was younger, if I heard or saw a plane flying low, we lived by a private airport, so it wasn't uncommon. I'd always be anxious until they were out of sight, just in case they dropped a bomb. I'm from Texas and was born in 1998. In no way have I ever seen a bomb, or been near one, or anything like it. It's just this deep-rooted fear that I have no idea where it came from. Not from any past trauma, in this life anyway. And it was never a fear that they'd crash or anything like that. It was always, they're the bad guys and any second a bomb will fall. Super specific. I don't know. I've just been thinking of this a lot recently. I don't even know if I believe in past lives, but let's just say they are real. Could I find out more about it? Is that even what this is? Or am I just looking for something that isn't there? I've always been so fascinated with the paranormal, but never had any experiences. I'm from the Midwest, and one of the only things to do in the Midwest is just drive around the countryside. My friends and I did this aimlessly, and we had an obsession with cemeteries. We went to every cemetery we came across and found some absolute gems. One on a hill in a grassy field where the stones are not even visible, aside from brushing the grass apart beneath your feet. Another back in the woods with no markers across an old bridge. Just all kinds of spooky and quirky cemeteries. We had looked up local area haunted locations before, but no major sites that we could stomp around at and never experienced anything. We later go to college and still see each other on the weekends every other week or so. We always wanted to find one specific cemetery that is known to be haunted, but the location is kept secret. My buddy's friends at college actually found it and went. Turns out they have to list the cemetery in county directories. Anyway, he tells us he could take us there, so we go. We went at sunset and tried asking questions and recording and so on. This goes on for some time into the night. We don't take it very seriously, but still want to encounter something. One of my friends puts his cigarette out on a tombstone to elicit a response. Yes, it was stupid and we were childish. We ask another question and wait. It was dead silent, and then we heard the leaves crunching step by step from the darkness towards us. It sounds like someone is right in front of us, but we see nothing. We wait there silently, frozen. Next came the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard. We're in a bit of shock, and the whole event still seems like I made it up in my mind when I reflect back on it. We slowly began walking, and then eventually running as fast as we could towards the car, without a word between us. I still think, what if it was a big cat or something? But where I live, they're pretty much unheard of. But I've still never heard a scream like that to this day. It gives me chills just thinking about it. I was 14 and I was up late. Everyone else in the house was asleep. I had a lot of problems with insomnia, as well as various paranormal activities that seemingly followed me around. So I was in my bedroom with the light on, listening to music to try and wind down and get some sleep. I had to use the restroom, which was the next door down in the short hallway. But my grandma was asleep on the couch in the living room, and my brother always slept with his door open. So I just snuck into the bathroom without turning the light on. There was a small nightlight. It was good enough to not trip on the rug. After doing my business, I leaned over the sink to wash my hands. And when I picked my head up, I met myself in the mirror. Only, it wasn't me. Everything looked like me, except the eyes were gouged out and bloody, and when I moved, it didn't. I booked it as quietly as I could back to my bedroom, but I had the sensation that I was surrounded by what felt like a dozen or more pairs of peering eyes, just watching me. I started to get lightheaded, and it felt as if they were closing in on me. Suddenly, I felt as though I was floating above myself, watching as someone else took control. I felt numb and helpless as I watched myself grab my eyeliner pencil sharpener, twist the tiny little screw off, and take the blade out and put it to my skin. I can't describe the transition from watching to doing, other than it felt blurry, until the sting of my skin tearing open brought me completely back into myself. I heard a faint laughter as I gained control again, and suddenly I felt alone, like my bodily harm was all for laughs. I'm deathly afraid of mirrors or any reflective surface in dark rooms since then. When I was 3, my dad and late granddad dug up a dried old up tree in our back garden. It wasn't a very big tree, but it was starting to break down the wall between our garden and the next door neighbours. I remember the dirt was really dusty as the roots were pulled up, and my dad picked up a ball from in the dirt right where the tree had been and gave it to me. For the record, I have lots of vivid memories from that house, which we only lived in until I was 5. This ball I kept with other marbles growing up. It was precious to me, but I never played with it, just stored it. Every few years I'd get it out and inspect it because it was like no other marble I had ever seen. It was bigger than normal marbles, dark brown with a couple of scuff marks in it. I recall as a 9-year-old trying to shine a light through it and nothing would pass through. And doing my inspection only to get deep skin, tingling lizard brain, alerting feeling of anxiety while doing this, and promptly put it away for years. I always knew where it was though. Fast forward to my late 20s, I'm early 30s now, and I realise the ball is not actually brown. It's black, and no matter when I take it out of its box, it would give me the chills for no reason. The past 2 years I've taken it upon myself to figure out A, what it is, and B, why it feels so bad. I now keep it in a wooden box beside my bed, nestled in my D&D dice, some of which are gemstones, and each session I will handle the ball to try to feed into it positive energy. It once gave me a shock to my elbow, which I can't work out. I told it off. I didn't know what else to do. The black ball has started to reveal thin, silvery lines below the surface. I've cleaned this thing with soap several times in my life and nothing ever comes off. But the more I handle it, the more it changes. A Wiccan friend refuses to touch it. A crystal shop owner suggested it could be silver swirl obsidian. And a Facebook group suggested it was buried because someone used it for something big and bad. The house we dug it up from was haunted. 3-year-old me has been frightened by things I'd seen. Anyway, I feel deeply responsible for this ball and don't feel I can let anyone have it to study it away from me. But it weirds me out. I really wanted to get it all off my chest. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. Its history had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were arguing. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and living room on one side, then a bathroom with 2 entrances. On the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows on one side and 2 bedrooms on the other. I could look across the hall into the bathroom from my bedroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser and I just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. That's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. Just like, what the fuck? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it just fucking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended. But as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the fuck outside, into the daylight, and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. When Brad Culp was a student at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, there was a rumor that the town was one of the most haunted places in America. When Culp started an on-campus magazine, He couldn't wait to write about several of the area's most famous phantoms. Not long after his story was published, though, he kept finding himself thinking about one ghost in particular, the ghost of Oxford Milford Road. As the story goes, many decades ago, probably sometime in the 1940s, there was a young man courting a young woman in a rural part of town. Because the woman's parents didn't approve of the match, each night he visited under the cover of darkness. After her parents went to bed, the young woman would sneak out of her farmhouse and flash the lights of her parents' car 3 times. Then her young suitor would ride his motorcycle down the road. One night, he took the turn right before her house a little too sharp, says Culp. The motorcycle went one way, he went the other. His injuries were so severe that he didn't survive. Rumour has it, however, that his love-struck ghost still haunts this stretch of Milford Road. Curious, Culp, his girlfriend, now his wife, and a friend decided to head out there one night to see if they could verify the tale. His girlfriend was worried she'd be completely freaked out. She believes more in that stuff than I do, Culp says. But he was mostly concerned that his suspicions, that none of this was actually true, would be confirmed. On this particular night, as Culp passed the abandoned farm, an idea came to him, and he pitched it to his girlfriend. How could she not say yes? Though reluctant, she relented, and Culp turned a short way into the farmhouse driveway. He killed the engine and flashed his lights 3 times. No joke, there was a single headlight that appeared 3/4 of a mile down the road, Culp says. You saw it start to come, going pretty slow. It kept coming and coming. My wife was freaking out. It was coming closer and closer. As a collision seemed imminent, Culp turned on his car's lights. He expected to see a kid on a bike, bailing out from his prank now that he'd been caught. But there's nothing there. The light is just gone, he says. They got out of the car. They walked around trying to figure out what it was they could have seen. To this day, we still talk about it. I saw something I cannot explain, he says. If you get him and his wife around a campfire, they'll swear up and down that the story is true. And if you're ever in Oxford, Ohio, consider parking for just a few minutes on Oxford Milford Road at night to test your own nerve. So this happened back in the early 2000s, when I had gone to visit my grandmother. It was a pretty big and old-fashioned house. A typical Portuguese house, actually. It had a long hallway and many huge rooms, since it was just my grandma and her maid who lived there. Most of the rooms were unoccupied and locked. My dad grew up in that house, and so did my uncle and aunt. They had practically spent their whole lives there, and never found the house eerie or scary. I, however, was never comfortable. From the very first day, I always got an unfriendly and unwanted feeling from the house. I was always extremely uncomfortable there. Now, it could be because I was raised in the main city and was accustomed to the constant sounds of vehicles and people and just random things all the time, while my grandmother's house was deep-seated in a village, away from the buzz and noise of the city. One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I got up to drink water. I did that almost every night. That night, I realised that I had forgotten to carry my water bottle with me, so I had to walk to the kitchen, which was down the hallway to the left, opposite to one of the locked rooms. Naturally, I was a bit hesitant, because old houses have a way to look creepy in the dark, but I ignored that feeling and headed down the hallway. I reached the kitchen, switched on the light, filled myself a glass of water and began drinking. As I drank, I looked at the locked door of the opposite room, which to my surprise, wasn't locked. I didn't find it completely fishy because I assumed that the maid must have cleaned the room and forgotten to lock it later. so I decided to check it out. I kept back my glass, switched off the kitchen light, and headed towards the room. When I entered, it felt like I was in a completely different environment. It was eerily cold and I got goosebumps. A very unsettling feeling washed over me. Something about this room was just so off. It was pitch dark. I could just see the outline of the furniture in the room. A bed in the middle, wardrobe to the right, and a dressing table on the left. Pretty basic stuff. But the bed looked so bulky. If the maid had cleaned it in the morning, it should have been perfectly made. But from whatever little I could see in the dark, the bed looked like it was used, slept on. My stomach twisted. I couldn't stand there any longer. I turned and ran towards my room. I locked my door and tried to distract myself. I thought about unicorns and some random stuff just to stay distracted until I fell asleep. The next day, I asked the maid if she had forgotten to lock the door of that room, and she seemed surprised because apparently she had never opened it. Apparently, she never opened any of the unused rooms, and she didn't have the keys. My grandmother told me she kept the keys in her drawer, and no one was allowed to take them. So I asked her about it. She seemed equally confused, but she assured me that I was probably really sleepy and imagined the whole thing. I mean, I'm sure it actually happened. Anyway, I've always avoided that place since. At the most, I stay till evening, but I never sleep there now. When I was 15, Paranormal Activity came out. My friend and I decided to try the Ouija board. We spoke to this guy named Frank, and I remember he used to say fucked up things like, "My mum is standing behind you, and she doesn't like you. I'll overdose on pills." Just weird and crazy dark shit. But my friend and I both thought we were fucking with each other, trying to freak each other out. A few weeks later, I was sleeping in bed. I had a shelf above my bed that had my grad teddy from primary school sitting on top. The teddy was sat there for years without being moved. And there was a dresser with a mirror at the end of my bed. I woke up to the teddy falling on top of my head, and when I would wake up looking directly into the mirror. There, I saw a girl brushing her hair in front of my dresser. I rubbed my eyes numerously, and instead of her disappearing, she became clearer. But the more I stared, it was like I was looking at myself when I was younger, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And she had thick auburn hair, but was wearing a very old style type of nightgown. Soon, I realized it wasn't. I hid under the covers, and after checking numerous times to see if she was gone, she finally disappeared. Fully freaked me the fuck out. Anyway, we stopped doing the board and did other things normal teenagers do. I never told anyone about what I saw, bar a few friends, but put it down that I was seeing things and was still dreaming. Fast forward to 11 years. I'm now 26. I picked up my sister and was driving her home, and she randomly starts talking about when my friend and I played with the board. And she's like, "Jose," my other sister, "and I swear you brought something into the house." I shrug and I'm like, "Why do you think that?" And she's like, "We used to wake up seeing a girl brushing her hair in front of us." I slammed the brakes and was like, "What the fuck?" And she's like, "Yeah, she didn't say or do anything, but just brush her hair." And then I fessed up that I saw her too, but I thought I was dreaming. Anyway, we both haven't seen her for many years, which I consider lucky, because I don't want anything in the house. But I must admit, it does still freak me out, and I really don't want to see her again. Moral? Don't fuck with the board. It's legit. It's fucked, and if my sisters and I all saw the same ghost, you may invite something in who you'd never want in your house. I grew up in a house that was built in 1902. I was born in the late 80s, so the house had been remodeled a few times. It was a two-story house with 3 bedrooms and a tiny bathroom on the second floor. The bathroom was at the top of the stairs, and my room was across the hall, kind of at an angle. My sister and my parents had rooms further down a long, narrow hallway. For as long as I can remember, I saw a ghost. I called her Pam. My mom told me I began talking about Pam around the age of 5, and in her words, I never stopped. My mom never believed any of this and just brushed it off as my imagination. Pam was pink and transparent, a see-through, totally pink little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She knew I could see her. I knew she could see me, but she never made a sound, ever. Nothing. She walked around only the upstairs and never came down the steps. Honestly, I have no idea where the name Pan came from. Growing up, Pam would sit at the top of the stairs waiting for me to run up to the bathroom after I got home from school. I would walk around her because she was always there, every day. If she wasn't sitting on the step, she would be just sitting on a bed or standing in the rooms or hallway. Harmless for the most part. However, if I ignored her, she would mess up my bedroom while I was gone doing my paper route. And when I would get back home, my parents would be all sorts of angry over my messy room. But if I said a quick hi, she wouldn't mess with me. She never touched me, and I also never physically saw her move anything with my own eyes. But I would get really scared and nauseous every time she would destroy my room behind my back. So I learned very quickly to say hi to her every day. At the age of 15, my mom put me into therapy because I was still bringing up Pam here and there. Pam was still always around. I was used to her, and she wasn't doing anything, so she didn't come up in conversation as often. Therapy helped, but not with Pam. When I was 17, my parents decided to put our house up for sale. I don't know if it was all the people walking through or me packing my stuff up, but something triggered Pam, and it got real crazy. About a month before our new house was built and ready to move in, I was asleep in my room. My bed was against the wall, and I could lie on my side and see right into the bathroom. While asleep, I had a dream about Pam, still transparent, standing in the doorway of the bathroom. She pointed up, and for the first time in my life, I heard Pam talk. She said, "Look, that's my mom." I sat up in bed, and from the light fixture saw a dark-haired woman, hanging lifeless by a rope. Her boots fell off of her foot, hit the floor, and I woke up. Holy shit. I couldn't say anything because my family never saw her. They didn't understand. Pam wasn't in their lives like she was in mine. I didn't really dwell too much on it. It was a dream. Pam was back to sitting on the top step the next day. Life as usual. But 2 weeks later, I had another dream. It started out exactly like the first one. The bathroom light was on, and I could kind of see in while laying down in bed. But this time, I heard weird grunting and splashing. I sat up and saw clear as day the woman that was hanging from the light fixture, only she was alive and holding Pam, no longer translucent, under the water in our bathtub. She was drowning Pam in our bathtub. I don't have any idea what made me wake up, but I couldn't contain my emotion. I ran down the hall and jumped into my parents' bed. Yes, at 17 years old. It was just my mom in there. I think my dad fell asleep on the couch or something, but I was hysterical. I told my mom everything through tears and gasps for air. My mom didn't know what to say. Then, in the middle of my sadness, Pam walked into the doorframe of my parents' bedroom. She was transparent again. I quickly laid down really close to my mom and pulled the covers over my head. I just remember saying, "Oh my God, Mom, she's in here." I held my breath, and seconds later, I felt cold, small hands on my back, shoving me against my mom. I kept yelling, "Stop touching me!" My mom could only reply with, "I'm not touching you." This went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only a matter of seconds. When she stopped, she just stood there at the side of the bed, staring at me. She didn't move. I pulled the covers over my head again and ended up crying myself to sleep while my mom held me. We were both shaking horribly. I moved all of my stuff out the next day and slept on the floor of our unfinished house the next few nights until my bedroom was done. I never went back. Shortly after my family moved out completely, before the next buyers moved in, the entire back of the house and the entire garage went up in flames. The official cause? Spontaneous combustion. The first people to buy and sell the house after us lasted 10 months there. They called my parents to tell them that they couldn't keep the window or closet door shut in the room with the black carpeting. My bedroom. I wanted black carpets when I was 15. I saw the house posted a couple of months ago online, and the only picture of my room shows the door open a crack. You can see a bit of the black carpet, but there's nothing in the room. The rest of the house is furnished. I've tried so hard to find any information about the girl that's in my old house, but there's almost no information at all. Just basic architecture and lot line documents. Hi, I have a problem. Since starting meditation more regularly a few years back, also working with my subconscious, like doing dream work stuff, I've become more and more aware of certain psychic abilities. I believe I have always had these, but I used to think they were just my own thoughts. Now I have come to realize that these thoughts or emotions don't belong to me. It has become more clear through the grounding exercise I do, for example, or the fact that I spend much more time alone, so I have something to compare with. When I'm in the company of others, images sometimes enter, or sounds. It has started happening more and more frequently, to the point I feel I can't hang out with almost anyone anymore. Riding the subway is incredibly stressful, or going shopping. I try to avoid activities like these during rush hours. It was always stressful, but I used to blame it on myself, thinking I just had social anxiety. For example, I was seeing a therapist for about a year. I began having more and more difficulties focusing on myself and my own feelings, because I felt too much pain as I went into the same room as her. I couldn't look her in the eye because then the pain intensified. Also, voices and images telling me things like, "I don't have the energy for this. I can't bear this." I asked her about this, like, "Are you sure you have the energy to work with me? I feel like I'm draining you somehow." And she was just like, No, I'm fine. I'm just concentrating on what you're saying." Or, "Why do you think like that?" Trying to make it about me. Then one day, she was on sick leave because she had a stroke. And now, she isn't working anymore. Another example, I had a roommate. She only stayed with me for a month. I couldn't handle longer than that. She had a lot of trauma and nightmares. I slept well before that and rarely have trouble sleeping. But the minute she moved in, I started having extremely vivid nightmares and night terrors about her. She could be sitting on my bed, dressed like a child, crying or something, asking me for help, or attacking me, and I would wake up shaking. My mental health started deteriorating quickly, so she had to move out. Every boyfriend I ever had, I could hear their thoughts too. I would always know, for example, what kind of shameful secrets they would be keeping and not telling me, like the one who was addicted to violent porn. And only a week into dating, I just knew this was the case. We hadn't even had sex. And I asked him about violent sexual thoughts, if he was into that stuff. And he just broke down in tears. Or my friends for that matter. I have one friend who I can literally hear telling me, or herself, I am so ugly. I am so ugly. Whenever we're in the same room, and I can't handle it. It's really stressful. She has very low self-esteem. Whenever I meet someone new, these types of voices keep entering my mind, or images, and I feel I can't have a normal relationship with anyone. They need to be 100% secure and at peace with themselves. And nobody I ever met is like that. The latest one is with my current therapist, who I fear is feeling some kind of attraction or affection towards me. I do not feel this way about him, I'm sure. I can't look him in the eye because weird stuff like flowers and pictures of him running around and acting happy and in love appears. I feel super creeped out and a bit disgusted by this. He's never crossed a boundary, but I fear I can't keep seeing him, or any other therapist for that matter, because they're all humans and imperfect. Please help. I'm 21, Chinese, wearing a Buddhist necklace from Grandma. My sleeping position is facing on top and mouth closed, and I sleep very well, like a pig. I'm just scared it come disturb me again, but after my mom left the room, I did try to sleep again till 11 a.m. I can remember 2 of my dreams before I went back to sleep. First, my previous house got creepy guy looking at a girl inside, near the fridge. Second, dream on game quiz within a circle I was acting in. After this dream, this is what I can think and move when I hear the voice. It happened before my mum's alarm rang. She wanted to dry clothes in the early morning, Saturday 8 to 9 a.m. And I know after a while she have woken up and closed the door, as the experience caused me to be awake. Woken up by a deep demon sound this time, it is a shorter talk, but sounds angry, loud on top of me. I can't tell what it was saying, like it's gibberish. Lasted a few seconds, happens to me occasionally and more frequently these 2 months, July and August. Previously, did not experience this. I can move my 10 fingers well. I can even think of what to Google and do after hearing this. I can open my eyes and look around and flip to my right side to try to sleep again. I always sleep with my mom. I'm a stress-free person with no anxiety right now, as it's school holidays. I eat healthily as well. It's happened a few times to me. Am I experiencing ghosts or am I hallucinating? I hope it's hallucinating. A bit of background regarding myself. I'm a progressive Muslim living in Malaysia, a country stuck between being progressive and conservative when it comes to religious beliefs. And as a child, I didn't always care. So anyway, I was 10 during the time, and usually in my country's education system, we would receive textbooks that were loaned by the schools. These textbooks are often held by previous students of the same school, and when they're done with the book, another student will receive it. I received mine from a student who, by the time, had passed away. I didn't think much about it and used the textbooks as usual. By usual, I meant that as a 10-year-old kid, I would doodle on it and draw moustaches on random portraits of people. I did this to a religious education book and drew satanic horns on a famous Islamic figure's portrait. What happened next scared and scarred me for life. It was just me alone in the classroom after school hour as I drew those horns and fangs on him. A gust of wind blew over and the pages of the book were turned. I went back to the page where I was doodling and I was shocked to see the page ripped and missing. I closed the book and reopened it, and to my surprise, it was there and it was intact. It looked like it hadn't been touched, like brand new. I was creeped out and closed the book and reopened it again. And this time, as I turned to the same page again, the portrait of that person was altered to the point it looks like someone drew a demonic entity over it. It had the typical look of a demon. That's what I could say. I grabbed the book and threw it into my locker, locked my locker, and never went back to my locker ever again. I went to an Islamic education teacher, an ustaz, and he told me that I should never do that again. He did some work, I guess, in exorcism, and that was the end of it. Lessons I learned: not to vandalize random stuff. You could be fined and sent to detention, or worse, ending up getting the biggest scare of your life.